Gopal, this is a very interesting talk we're going to have today. Now, there's been a dialogue about whether supervisory boards, the two-tier boards, are better than a single-tier board. It essentially came up after the financial crisis globally, when the American model obviously seems to have failed, and the European model seems to have sustained, even though we at Deutsche Bank do something the American way. Now, this debate seems to be intensifying, and people are examining globally whether we need a two-tier board as in Europe or a single-tier board as in the US. The UK follows the single-tier board. The rest of the world is somewhere in between. We follow the UK model. But why this debate coming up? What is at the core of this debate? Do you think any model will be better than what we have today? Any model, the two-tier model, will change fundamentally the way boards are run? Has the German experience been so outstanding that it works? I mean, the German experience has been based upon the political model, which is very socialistic. The American model is being based upon the open market capitalistic model. So there's a clash of business models too, and the German model doesn't pay high compensation. The American model pays obscene compensations. And if you look at market returns, maybe the American model overall has given better returns. So what is the root of this debate, and what do you think we need to look at?
To be honest, I'm not sure who's having the debate, other than you and I, in this place.
Well, I think there's a lot of literature that's coming up on this now.
Literature there is, but I think, you see, all forms of governance, public governance, corporate governance, family governance, any form of governance, school governance, they all must have their roots in the cultural soil of that society. And if you look at two-tier boards and the one-tier board, the single-tier board, they both have their roots in Anglo-American in the case of one tier, and about 9 countries, including China, by the way, have two-tier boards. Now, if you look at the cultural influence behind it, the UK-US model has evolved at a time when they said the capitalist system is the best system. You're supposed to respect the market the most, and you must reward the entrepreneur disproportionately. The rest of the stakeholders don't matter. Go back to the old Milton Friedman stuff. The German model, which has gone to the Netherlands and to Finland and now to China, which you have alluded to, comes out of a German model. Soon after the Second World War, as the literature has proposed, when it was felt there were a number of stakeholders in a company, the social factors behind it had been brewing for a long time. It manifested itself in a two-tier board. Both of them have run it. Each one probably thinks this is the better system, and we will tweak it and do it better. Now, there are lots of flaws with both systems. In a sense, in my own career, I have worked in a two-tier board, except it wasn't called two-tier, right? If I am on the board of Tata Power, or Tata Steel, or Tata Motors, and there's a Tata Sons, conceptually, not legally, it's a two-tier board. If Tata Power or Tata Motors wants more capital or is going to do something hairy, Tata Sons would be expected to be involved. For example, if you're raising more capital. If I'm Hindustan Lever,
Unilever board.
Unilever board. So, in a sense, we got experience of two-tier boards. However, the real legal system that we are operating is a one-tier board, where both independent and executive directors sit together. I don't think there is any great virtue of the two-tier board, because the argument that you can have far more free and frank discussions amongst the independent directors, because the executive directors are not there. If you're so damn scared of them that you can't even have a discussion in their presence, then I think you better rethink whether you should be on the board. I'm therefore not a great fan of a two-tier board, because this is like changing your wife because you're unhappy with this wife. I mean, you have to figure out how to settle your marriage here rather than keep looking for new wives. And that's my view.
Gopal, if you look at a two-tier board, the fundamental reason why people want a two-tier board is, of course, the political system, the cultural system. And also the fact that a two-tier board maintains a necessary distance from the actual management of the corporation. You have the executive board with all full-time people who run the business, who have a particular strategy, and you have oversight. And if you have both the people on the same board, it tends to get contaminated because you have an operational role, you have a governance role, you have an oversight role. People say there has to be a distance. Do you believe in this distance theory, or do you believe that having the same voice in the same board will reduce the asymmetry of information between two set of players who are supposed to run the corporation? The management who has all the information, and then you have a set of people who are called independent directors, etc., including labor, because a supervisory board has got a very large number from the employees union, who sit at a distance and who can take a decision very differently. I mean, do you think this separation of powers at the distance really makes a big difference?
Listen, distance does make a difference. Whether it's a positive difference or a negative difference depends on that context. You have had experience of this in your own career, and I want to ask you a question on that, but I'll come to that in a moment. If you don't mind, I can also ask you.
Yes, you can ask me questions, of course.
So this is a two-tier board, you know.
Of course.
I mean, to appoint Mohandas Pai as a moderator requires moderation. I mean, this is an unfair burden on the poor chap, you know. So we will sort of spar a little bit. Being the last session, isn't this the last session?
Before lunch.
So,
oh, last session. Okay.
This is the last session, so let's spar a bit, because that will turn the soil over. So your question was about the distance. You see, we say that operating board, the management board, can get so obsessed with their domain and their business and their competitors that they may lose the wood for the trees with developments happening outside. The independent directors can bring that view. Conversely, if the independent directors are living in cuckoo land and they're sitting in the supervisory board, and these chaps can say, these guys have no idea what's happening in the operations of my company. I'm not a great fan of the distance thing. In fact, I believe that human ingenuity and innovativeness always gets promoted by interaction, by dialogue, by communication, by convergence and collaboration. I am a great fan of 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and convergence. Those are the 3 steps that we need. And to do that, you must sit around the same table. And what you really have to do, and here is where I want to ask you a question. My experience is that if we shift the focus from governance, watchdog, Alsatian, you know, hang the auditor, instead of that approach, if we said, how do you improve the social dynamics of a board, you'll get far better outcome. And that's been my experience. I'd like to ask you, instead of this obsession with corporate governance, the laws and the accountancy, can we not have a focus on the board dynamics? What has been your experience?
See, our experience has been very good because we decided at the time of the listing that the board should be very different from what it was, the internal board.
When you say we, you mean Infosys?
Infosys, yeah. And I played a key role from '94 when, you know, after the listing. We wanted to have a set of people who bring to the board what we lacked. We are not a board member then, but we are part of management. What we lacked. What did we lack? We lacked an overall understanding of governance to bring about a balance between outside investors and large shareholders. We wanted a check and balance between the management and somebody who sees it at a distance. And we wanted somebody to step into a crisis in case we get into a crisis. So we were very clear what we wanted. So we got in people who had this kind of expertise. And that time we were a small company. So we got people who ran very big companies compared to us and who were quite reputed, who have been doing this for many years. And we had a fantastic board, including people from outside, like a Klaus Madda, Marty, and others who came in and did well. And we decided that we have to make it work. It's up to us to make it work. That means we must give them space, we must give them all the information, they must have full independence, they must have their own meetings independently, we must not interfere, and we must never trust our views. Now, over a period of time, it worked very well, except there was a little bit of tension between the two groups. What we wanted was...
Although they sat around the same table.
Yeah, same table. What we wanted was governance, oversight, and this. We were very eager. We wanted acceptance from these people to say, we are really running it well, we're doing everything that we could, complying with the law. What they wanted was a insight into strategy. They want to put strategy in. Why are you not doing this? Why are you not doing this?
And the operations.
And the operation. Operation is okay, but strategy. Why are you not doing this business? Why? And we should tell them, guys, we know this business. We'll report to you, otherwise sack us. So that's the only role of tension, but it worked very well.
But as the governance laws go, strategy is a very principle. Succession planning and strategy are the two big things.
But when you talk about strategy, the board's role in strategy is to have oversight about strategy, decide upon strategy, or give a feedback to management, and decide based upon what they see as the options. Is the management team is to come with options and decide. And when the strategy is to enhance risk, the board has to step in and say whether it is acceptable. But the board cannot write the strategy and decide upon the strategy.
Sure.
So it has to be a two-way work. Yeah. So I think it worked very well for a certain period of time. And then we had a particular issue. The earlier set of people retired. This company became very big. We had a new set of people who ran much smaller companies. They were understood the business, and things didn't go well.
Yeah, I mean, that will happen. I mean, a company board or a company as an institution is a social institution of people. In that sense, I'm saying a social institution.
Yeah, but we had to make space. But we have to make it work. I think the culture has to be open, transparent, collegial, and we have to make it work. We have to give them space, not control them. And management has to resist and draw back. Management means the full-time board members are the people who run the company, have to draw back to give them space, give them the respect, and give them space. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Now, I have another question about this two-tier board. The single-tier board is morphing into something like a two-tier board with a committee system. Now, you have committees for audit, you have committees for nominations, you have committees for compensation, for risk,
and independent directors.
And independent directors meeting together, and the lead independent director. The institutions within the single-tier board are becoming something like a two-tier board altogether. So do you think between this model of a supervisory board and two-tier board and single-tier board, there's a meeting, there's a congruence of interests coming together? I recently read that in Germany, because of the pressure of international capital, German companies have the option of having a single-tier board. Because, many people asking.
Is that something new?
I just read, I'm not sure, I got to investigate that again. I read that about a week ago. They've been given that option. So do you see these things coming together?
See, Mohan, I like to take instructions, if I may say so, or inspiration from nature. If you leave various plant species together, some of them will hybridize. And therefore, it's in the human nature, human instinct, human thinking is also like that plant species. You put a bunch of people together, they will hybridize. I'm not surprised, but I did not know that Germany is moving towards a one-tier board. But we are not talking about one and two-tier board as a 1.25 type board, like the ones that you just described, 1.5 board. Yeah. The question is, what is the real intent? Now, you explain, on behalf of the founders of Infosys, what their clarity of intent was and what they tried to do. That worked for some time, but people move on, and then things changed. But my experience has been, if there's a promote, you see, all entrepreneurship is like a wild horse, an Arab steed. And then you're trying to put a saddle on it, you're trying to put governance on it. In fact, the word manager has come from this Spanish word menager.
Menager.
And menager means taming a horse. Yeah. So independent directors are not independent directors. There are a number of steps that are taken, institutionalized, for taming the horse. But the horse is a horse.
It's unruly by nature.
No. If you expect a horse to sit quietly and follow all your instructions, then it's not a horse anymore.
Yeah, it's an ass.
It's a mule. Well, it's an ass, okay. Now, if there is an entrepreneur, who's got a malintent, I don't think anything can save you. And I think the real skill, whether it's one tier, two tier, and now you tell me if I'm being too idealistic, maybe I am, but I think my age, I'm allowed to be that. The true instinct lies of an independent director or any other person is by watching the harkat, the movements of the CEO and picking up early signals. And I go back to some social institutions which all of us are familiar with, which don't apply in the West. 95% of the weddings in India are arranged.
It works.
No, well, I don't know if it works. I will not go that far. But let's say it's been going on for a long time and it seems to broadly work. How do you fix arranged marriage? All of us come from families where there are arranged marriages. उसका हरकत देखता है, लड़की का चाल देखता है, बैकग्राउंड पूछते हैं, अंकल है, इन लॉ है, उसका तनख्वाह कितना है, इन्फोसिस में अच्छा काम रिपोर्ट मिला, लास्ट रेटिंग कितना मिला, सब कुछ पता लगता है. And I think by looking at those attributes that the person is surrounded by, you come to a conclusion that this is worth progressing further. When we look at our CEOs, and I will not take names, it's not appropriate, all of us read the same newspapers anyway, you can see some of them have blatant harkat.
Very openly.
I mean, it's in your face every day. And yet there are boards which say that we have done nothing about it. And I'm just saying, really, whether it's 1 tier or 2 tier or 3 tier, are we failing to bring human psychology, social behavior? And I feel, and I would like to know your opinion, not only of Infosys, but of any other boards, don't you think that's really where the independent directors' training should be? If at all you call it training.
Well, Gopal, I just want to make a statement that in all corporate boards, there has been failure. Show me one single board which has been around 25, 30, 40 years without failure. It's been failure. And why is there failure? Globally, every company, there's been a failure. Why has there been a failure? There's been a failure because a human being is an emotional person. And we have emotions. We create likes and dislikes, and we are not coldly logical. We react very emotionally. And we operate in a dynamic market. We don't read the signals in the marketplace to change. And we get carried away by success for a short period of time. Jack Welch was there 20 years, but he spoiled the company. I mean, Immel couldn't do anything because,
And they found out Jack Welch spoiled the company 20 years after he retired.
After he retired, but he spoiled the company and he was a great star. I mean, Citi blew up at a very particular point of time. Deutsche Bank was running the entire thing by itself, right? Do you see any company anywhere in the world, even in India?
But what does that prove?
What is that?
What is the point you're making? Yes.
No, the point I'm trying to make is failure is inherent in the system.
Right.
Our expectation of the independent director should be tempered. Our expectation that the panacea for all this should come down. And our expectation that any model will change should come down. What you must see is, what is the bare minimum we expect? And so long as the bare minimum is there, we evaluate and we accept that. And the bare minimum will be the makeup of the human being who's an independent director. Now, which are the boards which have succeeded the most? The boards where you had good people with good intent who spend sufficient time. When I say good intent, everybody's got good intent, everybody is capable, but have they stood the test of independence in standing up with integrity and saying no? If they have not, they compromise, it goes on. Because in boards, Gopal, we build consensus. See, consensus building is very important in the board. Otherwise, it cannot work. Like the dysfunctional political system we have today, it doesn't work. Parliament doesn't work. Because there's no effort to build consensus. Everybody has to get something. But the consensus may not be a perfect solution, and consensus building in a good board or period of time leads to failure.
So if your point is that there's been failure in boards and companies everywhere for a long time,
will be and will continue.
I would like it to take a metaphorical approach and ask you a question. Safety, industrial safety. From the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there have been accidents. Now, every time there's an accident, you get a full report, a study of what went wrong.
And you try to prevent it.
And then you measure your accident incidence rates. There are measures.
Right.
Environment. 50 years ago, it was different. Then you started to measure your environmental impact, how green you are, and there are measures. In the case of corporate governance, there's nothing. I'm not worried about the failure. I'm not worried about the failure. But if one failure happens, they beat that to death. But without any rational learnings and lessons. And do you think that the academic research on why failure happened, you cannot eliminate failure?
Yes.
You can mitigate its effects.
Yes.
That's what you can do.
Yes.
And my argument is, you mitigate the effect, the probability of a failure by behavioral patterns rather than legal methods.
Gopal, I would go further to say that the failure...
You agree or disagree?
Well, I would agree to you substantially because failure is a reality, is happen, will continue to happen. The thing is, what is an acceptable level of failure? What is a non-acceptable level of failure? Acceptable failure is when you make judgments and you fail. But non-acceptable is when there's lack of integrity There's a lack, there's
or lack of
cronyism,
process or
lack
discipline.
of process. That is not acceptable. Let's be clear about that. On judgment, there'll be failures, and we have to accept that. But the bigger challenge that comes from a point that you made, and that is, what is the regulatory reaction to this? We have found that in every case of failure, like Mr. Damodaran said in an earlier session, regulators come and put in more and more rules, more and more things, more and more burden. Then we had the Supreme Court lift the corporate veil in the JP case and say that all the personal assets will be hogged because they've been on the board and the board has gone and is gone. I mean, they overruled the law, and the Supreme Court makes the law. I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing that you can have, where an independent director is treated the same as management, and you are liable personally for details which you never did. Now, don't you think the problem today about corporate governance is regulators and excessive regulations? Market failure is there, the people have to be punished, you make simple corrections, and you go on. After Enron, we are Sarbanes-Oxley. Sarbanes-Oxley was draconian, all of us complied. Then we had the Satyam case, we complied with it. Now we got the ILFS case. Satyam case did not make ILFS better. We saw the government, ILFS was, proprietorship is going on its own.
And you referred earlier to people with what impeccable credentials of standing up, independence, etc. You're standing up and impeccable until you become peccable. And I can't put my hand on my heart and say I won't be peccable tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a perfect human being. And I don't need to ask you, you're not a perfect human being either.
None of us.
Now, it's like a cricketer, he misjudged one ball and he's bored.
Then it's gone.
It's gone. The real challenge of people who can stand up is, at the crucial moment when he had to stand up, did he stand up? If you stand up for the rest of the time, it doesn't matter because you're a sitting director anyway. And I think there are two parts which you have just led up to, which I would like to explore with you. One is, are we having too much regulation? And the second is, what is the existing regulator doing about the existing regulation? We are guests of a former regulator, so we'll speak with gay abandon, because he's not got any more powers now. So, my sense is, when you don't know how to tame this horse, then somebody catches it from this side, somebody catches it from that side, and this is the reason for the over-regulation. It is, I'm attacked in Parliament, so I'll pass a law. That is easy. But I have no method to enforce the law. I'll give you an example. And I'm not going to mention names because it will be improper. But I'm aware of a particular person. What did you call him? Upright director, all that stuff, unimpeachable credentials. And it's something that I just became aware of. He got arrest warrant, non-bailable warrant. Arrest for what? He exceeded 10 directorships at a particular point of time in the last 2-3 years. Became 11 or 12. Now this guy is unimpeachable, very upright. He went through his records and found he never exceeded. He was in some private company, something else, school board and hospital board. All that got added up by some babu somewhere. But he said, even he gets a notice from the Special Economic Offences Court of your city. And then he's asked that there's a non-bailable warrant out for you. Now, I asked myself the question, is it a criminal act to be exceeding 10 directors? Assuming a guy did so. The poor chap he went to the court, he sat around for 5 hours. This didn't happen in 1857, it's happened
now.
Yeah. Now, I'm told that's the law. Now, we've all had this Companies Act come in 2015. I was totally unaware. I'd like to believe I've been on enough boards for 30 years now to know as much of the law as I need to know. I don't consider it something which requires a non-bailable warrant if you've exceeded and become 11th company. Sorry? I'll come to all that. But it's the ROC, who else? Okay? Now, I'm not here to rubbish the public bodies. The point I'm making is that you can have regulation stacked one on top of the other, and then a regulatory body which is unable to cope with it. I'm sure there's no mischief in this. Somebody has just ticked a few boxes and sent off. But did you know that in the Companies Act, if you exceeded 10, you will be criminal?
No.
How many of the people in this room know that it's, I'm using the word criminal in non-legal sense because I'm not a lawyer, but if there's an arrest warrant for somebody, it can't be for
it can be arrested, it's criminal.
Huh?
How many know?
How many of you know? Now, it's absolutely shocking to be told that you exceeded 10 boards, you became 11 boards for about 6 weeks soon after the New Companies Act came in. So there's a non-bailable warrant. But this person comes back after giving surety, bonds, this, that, etc., 50,000 bucks down the drain. He gets a phone call from the police station saying, I'm carrying a piece of paper for you. He said, but you know, I've just been yesterday and it's been sorted out. Now, I mean, I don't want to flog that particular case. That's not the subject for discussion today. But it is this kind of misdirected regulation and implementation. You come to the city of Bombay or Bangalore, people don't stop at a red light. Is it any lack of awareness? Is it red? You have to stop. So I want to ask you the question that if you don't want to have piecemeal regulation, over-regulation, knee-jerk reactions, how can we do have a problem. I don't think any of us can deny that. How do you think we can go about it? 1 tier, 2 tier, 5 tier, you can have any number of tiers, but you'll have to mitigate the number of.
Well, I think the SEC in the United States has a very different way of doing it. Any transgression, they catch the person and make sure he goes to jail. Or he has to have a plea bargain and pay a very fine. And that sends a message that we'll accept some things, but don't go beyond the line. So I think they're very clear. The emperors of China had a very important way of governing the mandarins, because the mandarins used to govern the empire. You know, the mandarins became very corrupt. Every year they caught 4 or 5 of them and cut their neck. Of course, you can't really cut the neck. You can't cut the neck now. But if you make enough examples of people, you'll restrain this ability. There'll be some fear. Now, if you live in a fearless society, maybe the UK is the fearless society because many of the things they do is that the wink and a nod. With the wink and a nod, you know the right people, you get a knock, knock on the knuckles and it's gone. In India, of course, the courts make sure it takes 15, 20 years. It goes on. So the key thing is there has to be some kind of fear to make you know that you've got to be very careful. Or you cross the line, you'll be penalized. Second, there has to be some kind of an action, but not over-regulations. Now, regulators, I believe, think their job is to issue a lot of regulations, put in surveillance, put in everything else, and when it comes to implementation, they are constrained for various reasons. I won't blame them. They're constrained for various reasons because it's a very legalistic system unless they have the powers that the SEC has and the court system of the United States, which is work.
You must have talked to the registrar of companies in Karnataka because put him into jail. So this person got a non-bailable warrant for exceeding the number of directors.
Because they're becoming very activist because the law is very draconian.
But can I explore another aspect with you? And then maybe we should throw it open for Q&A at some stage. I have reflected a lot on this. You can blame the lawyers. When you finish blaming the lawyers, you can grab the accountants. When you finish them, you can grab the company secretaries. When you run through all of them, you can grab the independent directors. Then you can say the whole corporate sector is bad. So there are layers and layers, and each one takes its picking. I therefore took 15 cases, right? Not of corporate governance failure, but where the CEO was eased out. And I left out Me Too CEOs or people who defalcated. There were just differences of opinion within the board. CEO got knocked out. And I analyzed. I took all cases which have begun with my career. Not anything to do with me, but I was grown up and
you're not a party to it.
I'm not a party to it. I avoided cases where I knew a lot about it.
Okay.
Which means I didn't talk about Tatas. And I found something very startling. That the root cause of this is that power damages the brain. Do you believe that?
Power damages the brain.
It actually physically damages the brain. And I believe that is the reason why I keep harping back that you need psychological and social methods rather than legal and accounting methods. I've written a book on this. It's coming out next month. I'm not here to publicize my book. I want to assure you.
But how do you make it work, Gopal? I mean, we all agree. The root cause is the human being. The human being is an emotional animal. He has certain mental makeup, be a certain way. Power goes to everybody's head. Tomorrow you get unbridled power, you'll be a tyrant.
1 minute. We've all had power.
Yes.
We've all survivors like Me Too survivors. We are brain damage survivors.
Yes.
The good news about brain damage is that when the power is removed, your brain restores to normalcy. No, I'm serious. I've given all the psychological and neurological evidence of this. So the simple principle, I'm answering your question, how do you deal with this to do with the human being? I'm postulating that if that is the case, it is like saying there is pollution in Delhi. How can I protect myself? I can't stop breathing. So I buy a mask, I do this, I do that, I buy an air purifier. There are certain things that you can do. I have served on a board where the directors felt that a particular CEO was very miserly in parting with information. And if you asked him too many questions, he would send potas to you, which will keep, it's not possible to go through. And said, before some disaster happens, we spoke to him and eased him out. Now
But eased him out? Was it so serious that you had to ease him out?
This is my point. That director said, we don't understand what's happening in this company. We've asked him this question and he sends us this. We asked him the other question, he sends us that. We actually eased him out.
And did it work?
Well, once he's eased out, it works.
No, you got information, but did the company survive?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's a good company now.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying, therefore, that that is the only solution. But I do believe we are moving to a time when directors need to be able to say that we have tried everything. The fact that the guy is powerful is not a problem. The fact that his brain may be damaged is academic. It's not worth discussing. But if his behavioral pattern does not change, that's a good cause to consider whether you need a CEO change. Now, that's a bit maybe considered radical, but I'm at least putting it on the table.
Let me put the other way around. When is a good time to have a change in the board composition? Because now, you can change the CEO. I mean, what about the tyranny of the board? Now, the board
tyranny
is
by the board or off the board?
Tyranny of the board, by the board too. For example, the board is a self-perpetuating institution, right? Because it appoints its own members, is only limited by law. If the law doesn't say you have to retire, people will continue to be there for a long time because you scratch my back, I scratch my back. You get together in the board, a same set of people. You said the composition of board, if you look at every composition of board, you get together the same set of people who think alike, who are to be vetted by you, who have the same value system, maybe the same background, everything else. Diversity is, well, you have diversity by doing some things, but it doesn't create the necessary difference of opinion, difference of views, the necessary conflicts within the board to make it really good. Most boards depend upon consensus. The real conflicts don't come out. You need conflicts. And you need a culture of accepting conflicts. You argued
just a while ago that you must build consensus.
No, I understand that. The point I'm trying to say is
conflicts are not exclusive to consensus.
Yes. See, conflicts may lead to a better decision, but conflicts should not lead to breakdown. There's a thin line between breakdown and creating a consensus because you compromise. Life is a series of compromises. You cannot have one-sided view. Now, how do you deal with board composition, the independence of the board?
I honestly feel that corporate structures today are a successor. Their predecessor was a family business, family managed business, Indian society.
You mean one family replaced by another family?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in a family system, the independent director is the uncle, the bhatija, the brother-in-law. He's supposed to be a mentor. So if
sounding board.
If my son is growing up, I will say, you're my brother, you're my sister's husband, come and be on my board, mentor my son. I think our expectation, socially speaking, not legally, of our independent directors, they should be mentors. The legal expectation is that they should be watchdogs. And I think this is a fundamental social split. In the mind of people, you need a woman director, why not my wife? She has my best interest at heart. Why not my sister? Why not somebody who's an art collector? She'll bring a diverse point of view. So these are the kind of situations that we get into. But in our system, we also need CEO mentoring, as you require anywhere else.
Yeah.
Your point is that they're all becoming very, very alike. You've got laws that are telling you that you must retire at 70. Nowadays, institutional advisors are also becoming very active.
Yeah.
If somebody crosses a certain age, and they don't hesitate to offer their point of view. So I'm less worried. I mean, in my list of hierarchy of worries, that's a lesser worry than the fundamental divergence between the legal and accounting part, the professional part, and the human part. I find they're going in opposite directions. And to me, that is the big challenge of corporate governance.
Do you think another big challenge of corporate governance is the various stakeholders are not playing their role? Now, if you look at structures, whether the two-tier board or the single-tier board, there are shareholders who own the stock. They appoint the independent directors. The directors appoint the management run the company. The directors have oversight over the management. They have control, superintendence, and guidance. And they report back to the shareholders, and they vote it back to power. It's a beautiful structure.
And you have policemen in between.
You have policemen.
Auditors,
now,
company secretary, etc.
Now, for corporate governance to work, then there's an independent director. Now, the shareholders are not playing the role because institutional shareholders are not asserting themselves on certain issues and making their views heard. They're very weak. Even in the US, some of them are activists, but it's become much better. In the UK, it's become much better. In Germany, I don't think they exist. Institutions don't exist. They don't have. We're not read about it. Japan, they certainly don't exist.
So do you think India needs more shareholder activism?
Yes, I think India needs more.
Of the elite variety?
Yes, I think India needs more shareholder activism. Maybe third party, what do you call it, class action suits to happen to say that, look, you better be careful. Second, the auditors. Now the auditors just resign and go.
So do independent directors.
I mean,
they also resign and go as soon as the company runs into trouble.
Yeah. So where is the lack of care? I mean, resigning and going away is not a solution because you've been appointed to solve a problem. You're unable to solve the problem. You go. When you must stand up and take decisions. If you don't take decisions and go away, it is shareholders. The thesis is, in two-tier board or single-tier board, the problem remains that various stakeholders are not playing the role that they're supposed to. The pulls and pressures are not there to create a much better situation than what is. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that, but I'm just trying to figure out what is my agreement worth if I can't put a solution on the table.
Well, we need more activist shareholders.
Well, shareholder activism, let's call it that.
Not by individuals, by institutions who have a large stake. Otherwise, we'll get this, PILs type people, NGOs type, which are of no consequence. Because they don't have a stake.
Is it something that will really work in our society?
Well, I think it should work because I think in one case in Mumbai, when it comes to board matters, I mean, it did work to some extent because the voting power demonstrated that you can't have
rather than look for two-tier boards and three-tier boards,
yes,
you're saying
I think even in two-tier board, the fundamental challenge remains lack of shareholder activism. Germany, there's no shareholder activism. I mean, there are no institutional shareholders who take an interest. It's only there in the UK now, and it's there in the US.
The US in a big way.
Big way.
And in the US, company directors tell me that it's an absolute nuisance.
Yeah. So that may be one.
But it keeps them on their toes.
So if you have a good set of regulators who take action, if you have a good set of activists, shareholder activists who are large shareholders who demand certain performance, they put the pressure, and then you have auditors who play the role of, you have auditors who play the role of being very, straight and not compromising because of various issues. You have the analysts who point out things going wrong. Well, some of the analysts in the US is very good. And then you have the independent directors who are to oversee that. That will be a better balance than a two-tier board or a single-tier board. The systemic influences have a greater impact on better corporate governance than whether it's a two-tier board or single-tier board. Do you agree with this conclusion?
I think that's difficult to say I don't agree with. How to construct that cordon sanitaire is something I need to think about.
No, because if you look at two-tier boards, single-tier boards, we see a morphing coming together. So do we need a two-tier board at the time come for a two-tier board? Well, it is moving towards that, but it is not a panacea or a solution for what we have. So it doesn't make too much of difference, right? Because the failures have been there both sides. Second, what do we need better independent directors? You always need better independent directors, but they don't exist. Third, are expectations too high about independent directors?
There I would have a slight disagreement. Don't say better independent directors don't exist.
No, 4,000 companies. You don't talk about few companies.
I'm not talking of the numbers. I'm talking of the quality. Even in the 4,000.
Where the people of look, there is
Are we expecting them to be trained in the right methods?
See, Gopal, there is a personal input that you can give about ethics background. There are enough good people in the world.
Yeah,
second, there's competence.
Maybe you're right. Yeah.
Second, there's a level of competence. There's not enough competence. And third, the ability to take a stand and the financial standing is something that one has to see.
I think we need to train people in how to disagree without becoming disagreeable.
That has to be trained, or is a personal characteristic?
No. It can
I
be
think it's
trained.
born with people.
No, I disagree.
Okay.
This is what I mean by behavioral brain damage. I use those words. It is a specific training, how to disagree without becoming disagree.
And
we need it in the public governance system also, by the way.
Yeah, but there's a characteristic.
But maybe we should ask our...
Now, I'll just finish one point.
Yeah.
The next point is regulators. I think regulations have to be lighter in both models, because you have over-regulation becomes a checklist. There is no spirit, there is no principle. It becomes a checklist, and checklist only gives you a false sense of security. For example, our bank NPA is not recognized earlier because the accounting standards were reduced to a checklist, and you could game the checklist. So if you look at all that, what is your conclusion? Then we'll have a Q&A.
My conclusion is to take a lesson from a completely different area, and I'll summarize it. I will not go into detail in the interest of time. I think it's called Challenger, the space.
Yes, it crashed.
No, I'm not talking about its crashing. NASA put up into that Challenger in 1970 a certain special mirror which could take pictures of the moon at a very, very special angle, which would be rare and therefore very giving a lot of knowledge. Once the Challenger went up, every test had been done. It failed. When they found why did it fail, the mirror, I'm talking not of the Challenger, they found that the mechanism on which the null connector did not work. When they did the whole research, they found that the supplier knew, because it was not giving consistent results. So they told the supplier, why didn't you tell people? He said the atmosphere was so scary, because targets, time, it happens in every company. You know what the solution was? The director of astrophysics resigned, saying this is a leadership failure. He went into a university, and he's now written a book to say what were the behavioral things that they missed. I think we need that in corporate governance. At least I've said my piece. You may or may not agree with it. And I think if we can have what he called the 4D mechanism into our company governance, I would even go one step further into public governance. And corporate governance is a mirror of public governance. You look at the quality of public, I don't want to pass the blame to public governance, but I think in that atmosphere this happens. So this is my view.
Well, I would conclude by saying that I think there is a blurring of lines between a single-tier board and a double-tiered board, and both sides seem to be moving together. But the fundamental issue is the ability of a set of people to look into issues and come, which is limited by the human experience. It works, it may not work. We must accept a certain level of failure, lower our expectations, and make sure we're able to manage. I think that is my conclusion. Any questions?
Or comments or disagreements or whatever.
Yes, sir.
This is regarding the point which we are just mentioning about over-regulation. Here, sir.
Yeah.
So we've all been taught throughout, and we live it day in, day out, about the law of karmic accounts. And we say that if you do a good deed, you will get a good benefit, but your bad deeds cannot offset your good. So if you do a bad, you will be repaid by a bad. But in corporate, the way regulations are framed, one bad corporate behavior is leading to one bad law. The problem is, I have to pay for the sins of corporates.
Good point.
As a class. So we have to perhaps rewrite the law of karmic accounts for corporates, that you will pay a price for one bad behavior as corporates as a class. So that's just a point I wanted to make. And should the regulators weigh properly what is the pros and cons? Is the benefits going to be achieved by doing a new regulation going to far outweigh the cost? And are there, like Mr. Damodaran yesterday made a very valid point, there, even when Satyam happened, there were enough existing regulations which could have taken care, but we quickly...
Enforcement was lacking.
We jumped to make new regulations. Like in judicial principles, we say, before really pronouncing, if you have a benefit of doubt, see whether the person is a perpetrator or a victim actually. The same should apply even for lawmaking.
So Trump is right. Trump is right.
Yeah.
He's cutting regulations, right? Okay.
Sir, one point and one question. Point is that I think in this whole debate of single tier and two tier, the various topics that we have discussed over the last couple of days are pointing to review and regulation on top of review and regulation to cover the aspect of mistrust. And, other aspect we were discussing yesterday on annual reports and reporting and disclosure brings out a very interesting irony that the disclosure levels have improved, the number of pages in annual reports have increased, but the understanding has significantly reduced. So, do we need to complicate further, or do we really need to dumb it down? As far as the understanding is concerned, and then perhaps we will not need as many independent directors, not need as many reviewers, as many regulatory authorities, if things can be dumbed down for laymen to understand. This was a point.
Okay.
The question that I have, sir, is that you spoke about shareholder activism. It was interesting to see that the two of you had divergent viewpoints. I want to call out the fact that one of our own IT peers, US headquartered IT peers, had a significant activism incident last year. The activist investor made tons of money within a span of the year.
Sorry,
but a lot of
made tons of money.
Made tons of money in the span of a year and has now exited. But the company's rhythm, a lot of us agree, has significantly broken down.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, is activism good, bad? Do we, stand to conclude, or will it always be on a case-to-case basis?
Okay. Well, my view is activism is good for the system. There are limitations. There'll be some victims, because that company spoke. I know the company well. There'll be some victims, and I agree with your earlier point that we need to have a lesser amount of regulatory instruments and better, let us say, enforcement to make things work. Gopal?
Any measure you take, there's a law of unintended consequences comes into operation. And you have described one such law. But on the balance, you have to apply a possible remedy at a point of time. And I think, I speak for you also, I think, we are saying at this point of time, in India, maybe shareholder activism of a higher order will play a role. It will become an excess after X years, and then it will be time to review it.
Shareholder activism is at a very nascent stage now in India. In this context, what would be your take on the proxy advisors' role? We have recently seen an episode in which suddenly in the voting, the proxy advisors has created an impact. Would it be a tool to check the management, or will it give a lot of power in some of the global agencies and investors?
Well, I think proxy advisors have come as a reaction to the lack of ability of investors to decide on issues. You see, please remember, if you are a large investor, you are a manager. You're not the owner. And you have to take a decision. On what basis will you take a decision? So you need to have somebody else outside, like a proxy advisor, who studies and gives you a recommendation, like a lawyer's opinion. This is the view. So long as you comply with that, you are safe, right? Because you're forced to take a decision. So proxy advisors are a market mechanism which works. I think they are necessary, but people must apply the judgment. Most people will not apply the judgment, will go blindly because nobody asks you any question. But I think they're necessary. And what happened in India was, I think, a necessity, even though somebody complained that is too much, because they are the owners of the stock. You can't question why they decide either way. Once I own the stock, I am the owner. I have a right to vote. Now you can't question me, why did you vote like this? Why did you vote like this? Because I am the owner, right? So they need it. Gopal?
I think I concur with you. And it's a completely nascent stage. And I think the sentiment that we are expressing is we need to have more proxy, I don't call them proxy, shareholder activists. We need to have constructive shareholder activists, and that is part of the journey of improvement.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
The conference theme is Gatekeepers of Governance, with both of you on stage, and with whatever happenings have been there at the board level, at the shareholder level, in the Tata Group, as also in Infosys. For good order, Mr. Pai, I would like you to comment on the takeaways from what's happened in the Tata Group. And Gopal, you can comment on the takeaways from what's happened in Infosys.
And we're not allowed to challenge each other.
You are allowed to challenge each other.
Well, I think, well, I'll start first.
Honestly, this is an extremely important question. I'm not asking it frivolously.
I will.
Because for all of us, there is a tremendous amount of learning there.
Well, my reading of the Tata Group what happened was that there was a superstar culture created where one person was bestowed with all the wisdom to take a decision, and his views were very final, and there's not enough open dissent or open flowering of different kind of thoughts. I'm an outsider, I will see that. So I think, and that led to certain things happening, because once you have a superstar, everybody bows to the person, and so long as you're part of that person's radiance, you're perfectly okay, everything is forgiven. So there were no checks and balances, it became the thing. Second, the public spat was unnecessary, in my view, as an outsider again, was unnecessary because you could have left it to shareholders to decide. And it unnecessarily spoiled the name of a very great corporation. At the end of the day, it's a great corporation. I mean, it's been there for a long time. There are changes, everything that happens. It happened when JRD was there. It'll happen again when somebody stays there too long, becomes powerful. It's all a power game. Somebody comes into power, he becomes a superstar, he stays long enough, and then everybody goes out to him because his word is law. The board looks up to him and says, this is a law. It happens. It happens to Jack Welch. It happened here. So that's my reading of the situation. So I think it's cyclic. The solution is the person at the top should not be there more than 8 to 10 years. Maybe that will check this cozying up, because the first 5 years, when somebody is in power, is learning and doing things. The next 3 or 4 years is when you see the fruit of everything else. After that, you become defensive, because human nature is to become defensive, and I think that's the end of the matter.
Have you got the answer to your question?
And we would like to have your comments on this.
No. I'll come to that. Have you got the answer to your question? Because that's very much more important than my comment on it. In Parliament, I was once given a training how to answer questions that come up in Parliament. Typically, the question will say, will the Honorable Minister of so-and-so be pleased to state, A, B, C. And the standard answer was, yes sir, no sir, does not apply. That worked for 80% of the Parliament questions. I've actually done this exercise at a point of time in the 80s. And I have got the same response to this. Yes sir, no sir, does not apply. You can interpret it whichever way you like. The fact of the matter is this, and that's the nub of what I would like to pick up on. He said it could have been sorted out more elegantly, which is my comment on Infosys.
Yeah.
I also feel, but, and here is the big but, it's happening with the banking regulator also right now in the finance ministry. What happens if you've tried very hard to the best of your skill and you've not been able to sort it out? Whether it's Tata, whether it's Infosys, or it's the RBI and the finance minister. If you got those players to come and talk, whoever was there at that time, I'm sure they will be able to, and assuming that they wanted to, they will be able to explain to you that they tried very hard to sort it out, whatever the difference was.
Didn't work.
But it didn't work. I have little doubt that in Infosys, and I know the people concerned personally, they would have tried very hard. When it did not work, then these matters blew up. And I think the nub of this is this. That's why I said, can you learn to disagree without becoming disagreeable? All of us have a certain limit to our behavioral pattern. And once that limit is crossed, it's a public company, let it come out in the public. What can be done? Nothing wrong with it.
Yes, sir.
One question and one suggestion, or maybe one comment and one suggestion. We heard about institutional activism, whether it's good for India, bad for India. You need to watch out for institutional adventurism, which is the case that he spoke about. Just as in the judiciary, judicial activism is good, but judicial adventurism of the kind that you've seen in some of the judgments is a terrible thing, and it's something from which you cannot pull back. And my suggestion on board tenures is this. The Rajya Sabha has an excellent principle. I call it the Rajya Sabha principle. Continuity with change. Give a 6-year term, take out 1/3 of the board every 2 years. So everyone stays on the board for 6 years, no second term. Every 2 years, 1/3 of the board goes out. You get in another bunch of 2 persons. If that is tried, perhaps you will.
But that is the case now for independent directors.
No. It's 5 years plus 5 years plus special resolution. If you can fix the voting pattern, and God knows, till kingdom come, you can be.
But I do believe that with the new changes that have happened in the last 2-3 years, that will not be able to, that may not happen. But that's a matter of an opinion. We'll have to wait 10 years to find.
I think for the first point, my view is that life is cyclical. There are going to be excesses. There are going to be a blowout. Then you start the change. And I think the change has to happen if you have to move forward because circumstances change. How do excesses blow up? You've seen Greenspan talk about irrational exuberance. He was there. He saw it happening before his eyes. He refused to believe it. Everybody refused to believe it, that you can give the ninja loans and blow it up and all. Everybody saw it coming. Nobody took an action. There has to be one single event where the whole thing blows up, then the reaction changes. But you saw it happening, right? You look back in hindsight, you see it happening, then a blowout comes. Now, can you stop it? Do you have the wisdom to stop it? Human beings don't have the wisdom to stop it. They can't stop it. They get carried away. So when you live in a world where there is rapid change, there are too many forces working, and there is human emotion at play, and everything goes one way, it's going to happen. So what do? I mean, I don't know, because as the Queen said, the Queen went to LSE, I think, and said, why didn't all you eminent people ever tell us that these things could go wrong? What are we doing? Nobody had an answer.
No,
So,
Greenspan's problem was a little different.
Huh?
Greenspan's problem was he had one solution for every problem, reduce the rate by 25 basis points. It doesn't work beyond a point. It's like a doctor saying, no matter what your problem, I will give you aspirin.
Yes.
So that was Greenspan.
Yeah. Yes, Gopal?
No, I was just going to say, coming back away from Greenspan back to more mortal things like what we deal with. There is a technique to read prodromal signals. Prodromal signals, which means the symptoms that arise before the, and there is a technique for it. So I keep coming back to the same point.
So you want a psychologist on every board
No,
now?
no, I don't want a psychologist. I do believe that ignoring the social and cultural aspects and just going on the legal and the accounting part is not going to get you far.
But Gopal, I mean...
And we have very sound cultural...
I want to take a very controversial thing. No, I'll come to the fundamental. Gopal, our culture is based upon the role of dharma. Our value system is based on dharma. The Western corporate governance value system is based upon the Protestant work ethic elucidated by Max Weber, right? Now, in India, when that culture comes here, it becomes a checkbox. Our heart doesn't believe in it because, like you said, in the Karta system, in the family system, there is the expectation is mentorship. And the Karta has a duty of care to everybody. He does his duty. For him, it's a duty. It comes out of his ethical constant. Now, we created an alien system and come here.
So you're saying the same thing as I'm saying?
I'm saying, but what is the solution? How do we make it work?
Once we can get consensus that we are thinking in English but acting in Indian.
Acting in Kannada.
Huh? Really, the problem of our corporate governance is this.
That's very India-specific. It's India-specific.
India-specific. We are talking India here, right? We are not talking global. Hopefully. We are really thinking in English, legislating in English, but acting in Indian. And that is the root. See, once we agree to that, then there are certain measures.
If an entrepreneur says, I own 52%, this is my company, I will take care of it, I'll take care of everybody. Is anything wrong? And he says, independent directors, look, it's my money, I am the biggest sufferer, let me take the decision. What are you guys doing? I own 52%. Now, can you really fix a problem? For example, Sanjay Nair was here, he dug the question, I think. When he's got a controlling shareholder, the board doesn't matter. They're going to tell the management what to do. And the board is there to show people that, yeah, we got this, we got this. You think a controlling shareholder will listen to somebody who's got a contrary opinion than you?
Well, the contrary person can always step down and place his reasons in the public domain. Yeah. I'm sorry, there is a way.
But it
he doesn't do it.
It makes no difference. The investors still carry on. Does it make a difference?
No.
Can you give me one example where there's a controlling shareholder and there's a director who opposed and stepped down and people protested? Give me one example.
Since the red light has come up, I'm hesitant to do that.
No, continue. I think she's given us time. He's given us time. She's given us time. Tell us,
this is an area I wanted to explore, but in the interest
go ahead. 2 minutes. We'll finish it.
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But I've always wondered in these several cases recently where independent directors have stepped off. And their reason is, I'm busy with other things. It's a cop-out. They are required under the law to state their reasons. But I'm told, I said, what's the harm in stating your reasons? That I disagreed with the CEO or the chairman or what. I'm told it has a lot of legal liabilities. Is that true?
Yeah. You can be sued, no? I mean, legal liability, the threat of a
No,
legal
if he
case.
says, I disagreed with them on this acquisition or on this or that, will he be sued? No, I don't think so, right?
The company can go against him.
Can the company go against him?
There will be unpleasantness, but I don't think he is going to be sued because he differed. He might be sued because he agreed with the wrong decision or
No.
absurd decision.
In expressing his difference, he is revealing company secrets to which he has been fiduciarily privileged to.
No, but you've seen what Chandrasekhar did in the Yes Bank case. He said, I was uncomfortable. Therefore, I left.
But what are the reasons? Why uncomfortable?
Exactly.
I'm sure he would have set it out wherever. It's not in the public domain, I imagine.
But shouldn't he be in the public domain as a listed company?
And that's
appointed by the
if you
shareholders.
put it in the public domain, I'm told it will be a lot of problems.
Shouldn't he give it to shareholders because appointed by the shareholders? He has a duty of care to the shareholders. When he resigns, his letter should be in the web, open to everybody.
No, at least he's traveled this far to
He's
say
come.
I'm uncomfortable.
I agree.
Which is a good starting point. Let's see how it develops.
Yeah.
So I think so this 52%, 60%, we have this challenge in this country. In America, this is not much of a challenge because there are not many such dominant shareholders. They become institutionalized. There's a different market. In our market, we have a controlling shareholder who runs the show.
Yeah.
And controlling shareholders tell us, and it's true, some of them have got far superior performance. And Gopal, when there's no controlling shareholder, there's professional shareholder like you or like me, we behave in the same tyrannical manner. We stay in power for 15, 20 years, we do many things, we control, we behave like a owner.
But my experience and observation has been that if you don't have a controlling shareholder, you have a dominant CEO. The chairman becomes the controlling person, not the shareholder. And you'll see certain companies where he becomes a law unto himself. But anyway.
So it's the impossible trinity.
No.
Impossible trinity between between the board, the shareholders, and the management.
I would not.
One of them has to give way. Three of them will never work in unison. That's the conclusion, whether you have a two-tier board or a single-tier board.
No, there's a tension. There's a tension amongst these. And whether you have one
What does
tier,
physics tell you when there's tension between different components?
there's an equilibrium.
There's no, it gives way.
There will be an equilibrium point, and that's equilibrium
But
point.
equilibrium comes only when it stretches and bounces back, so there's a failure.
That's what I told you, brain damage always reverts back.
Okay, folks, thank you very much for this engrossing talk. Please give a big round of applause.